Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
All right. Welcome to episode number 11. Actually, number 12. Today you'll hear about BDSM, or Bondage and Discipline, Dominance and Submission, which was previously known as Sadomasochism, with David, who is my guest, and we'll be talking about consent, negotiations, and dating kinky. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe or follow my podcast. All right. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you. This is a new topic for us. We talk about dating and sex. Most of them seem to be about dating. So I think this is a good one, which I guess is kind of both, but a new aspect of the sex side. So we talked about consent first. We'll start there and then see how the conversation goes. What do you want to say about it? Or
Well, when we had initially talked about doing this, I feel very strongly that I think within the BDSM community, and I know many of the folks in that community feel very strongly about consent specifically. And there's a couple of different models, but probably one of the most popular ones right now is one called RAC, R-A-C. And it's an acronym for Risk Aware and Consensual Kink. And originally the common phrase was safe, sane, and consensual. And the difference sometimes between BDSM and abuse is that consent. And that consent is critical and, of great importance. I think, there's a really great video that made its rounds for a while on YouTube that was discussed an analogy between tea, giving someone tea, and consent. And one of the points of that video was the fact that consent can be withdrawn at any time from both sides. And much the same, when you're doing anything within the realm of BDSM, there's a risk. Just as there's a risk if you were to walk across the street. A car could hit you, a plane could fall out of the sky. And something, a consent model like RAC definitely recognizes the fact that, at times there is risk in said activity, whatever it is, emotionally, physically, and both parties need to be cognizant of those risks. And I think within the community, being aware of that is critically important. And that consent, again, you have to be able to talk about that freely between both parties and remind each other and check in with each other throughout, whatever it is that you're doing, your scene or, your bedroom play, whatever it is.
Is it normally this kind of stuff normally within couples, or is it, I guess it can be the whole spectrum of other couples involved and all that too, but are you generally speaking of like couples that do this, or? It
could be all of the, it could be all the above. For me, it's a very different experience than maybe somebody else. There's a very popular website that's kind of like the Facebook of the kink community, and that website is FetLife. And you'll find on that website, all kinds of organizations within the community that talk about their specialties. So if you want to learn more about spanking, you can go to that. And those meetings are called munches. And that's because generally you have a meal. It's generally most of the time it's at a restaurant. And people don't dress up in any of the fetish attire. They're dressed in street clothes and have, fairly quiet conversations, between consenting adults. And again, most of those folks will discuss whatever their kink is. Hypnosis is another one, there's a very vast array of choices from which to choose from. And it's kind of like a buffet that you would say, okay, I want this and don't want that. And it's been my experience that I'm getting to the point of the couples, not a couple. I think especially on FetLife, and this has been my own personal experience, is those folks are generally more, BDSM is a much more integral part of their life. That it's for me personal, and this doesn't apply to everyone on the planet. It's something that would happen just in the bedroom, and it doesn't really bleed over into the other parts of my life. And it really is only a small subset of who I am as a person. And I think a lot of the folks that attend those munches, it's a bigger part of their lives for them.
Yeah, and I know the opposite of all this, people call it vanilla. So I'm sure there's a few of both kinds out there, because I'm definitely more vanilla. Like I went to a podcast conference a couple weeks ago, She Podcast Live. It was awesome. But I met many other people and like the accidental swingers, and there's, that whole group too. So, and I met a few BDSM people that had, one woman had like her husband spanked her once, and she's like, oh, like she kind of liked it, and she didn't realize like there was a whole thing around it. So now they're like exploring it. So.
Oh, great. That's great. Yeah. And a lot of times that can happen organically within a couple's relationship is one person wants to explore, maybe both of them discuss it. And, that's something else that I have certainly found in the kink community is every single person that I have come across is a very good communicator. And that seems to be a consistent skill that I see. And it is very required, very much required. You've got to be able to communicate your feelings. You've got to be able to not just, output what your feelings are, but also be very keenly aware of what's coming in and listening to that other person, perhaps watching that other person. If somebody, and I'll give you an example, let's say that perhaps somebody's tied up, and I need to know, and I would check in with them frequently to make sure, hey, you okay? Do you feel anything going numb? Do you feel any tingling sensations? And then I react to that. And again, to go back to that rack, risk aware, if I've got a young lady who is tied up, I have 2 pairs of shears, emergency shears, that are right next to me, so that if something's an issue, I can resolve that very, very quickly. And things like, at least to me, it seems common sense, but, I see pictures of, somebody maybe left alone, all tied up somewhere in the woods. And that certainly isn't within the realm that I would consider anything safe for a myriad of reasons. But, if somebody's tied up and they're helpless, you don't leave them alone, not even for a second, just as if, much the same, you would never leave, an infant child alone in the woods. They have no way to protect themselves. So again, much the same, if you're playing around with something like rope or, any other kind of bondage, you want to be very, very cognizant of all of those things. And we talk about, I know I'm kind of leaping a little bit, but, I was talking about that tingly feeling that you might get in your hands or your feet or your legs, but, and I might also be looking for visual signs of something. And there are ways to learn about where to tie someone. Those things are also important so that you don't hit certain nerves. Those are what we would call bad pain. There actually is good pain and bad pain. There's good things that happen. And I think people I know, at least for me, feeding off of those endorphins in that moment feels really good. And, to start somewhere in the beginning, you generally, again, would start very slowly and wouldn't just walk up to somebody and, throw a whole bunch of rope around them. Unless that's really what they wanted and you had discussed it with them previously. Yeah. You generally want to work up to those things slowly and kind of take your time.
Yeah, I know in the conference they mentioned...
You did ask about... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say they mentioned communication many times over, like they're just emphasizing what you said earlier. about communication being the most
Absolutely.
important part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume teasing. Sorry, you can go with your thought too.
One of my favorite things. Yes, teasing is certainly one of my favorite things. And, to be able to draw something out is, that happens to be very exciting for me, and to be able to take my time and not rush, immediately and give in to that raw animal need immediately. It's to, really rein that in, and that takes control on my part. In my case, as the dominant, I have to rein in my own, my own anticipation, my own feelings to want to perhaps ravage the person that's in front of me. And I kind of slow down, and, maybe I'll go to something much more sensual, like just gently rubbing my hand over her skin or something like that. And then maybe go back to, if we're spanking her, I might spank her a few times and then go back to being very slow and very gentle. That happens to be the way that I would enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the draw, I thought, of the 50 Shades books. Like women were so into those, but I think a lot of people misconstrued the interest. It was more the teasing aspect, not just that they were doing it at all, but to me, at least personally, the teasing and the prolonged and going slow, I could see where that would be part of it.
Mm-hmm. It's very sensual. It's a sensual dance, and as you're doing it and you are teasing, again, you've got to be very cognizant of physically what's happening. I'm looking for, is my partner's body, is she getting warmer? That could show excitement. What sounds is she making? I might check in with her, and, I might say, are you good right now? Are you doing okay? And those things happen. It's very much, unlike porn, that there's very little communication a lot of times. And I think that's a misconception. In addition to the negotiation aspect, that is a huge part of BDSM as well, is taking the time to find out, okay, I like here's 500 things. Here's an example. Here's 500 things. Here's a list. Go find, why don't you show me 15 things on here you would enjoy exploring? And, somebody may say, I want to explore being mentally dominated. So I would tell somebody, I'd tell my partner, okay, how long would you like to do this? And what are the confines? What is that going to look like for you? And we would talk about that. And I know to some folks that might not sound as organic as they would like, but a lot of times, especially when you're starting with a partner, you've got to be crystal clear about what that scene or what that moment is going to look like for the two of you, because spanking to one person is generally a very different thing than, some people want to be spanked to tears, and, they enjoy the catharsis of that. And, you've got to be able to discuss, okay, I'm ready to be spanked I'm good with 15 minutes. I really would like a build up from, start with your hand, and then we'll go to, then we'll start lightly with a paddle, a wooden paddle, and then maybe we'll go to the bigger paddle. And those things are discussed before you even start. And then, again, something else that is absolutely critical is something called aftercare. And that is when the scene is done and complete, many times the submissive will feel, or the bottom feels, needs that touch, that time. And again, that's also is negotiated. I know this sounds very prescriptive, but it's really, in my opinion, the best way to do it to be completely safe for both of you is to understand what that's going to look like beforehand, and then you make that happen. So some people don't like to be touched in their aftercare, and they just want to be left alone. Okay, here's a blanket. I'm going to give you a blanket, and maybe go get you a bottle of water and an energy bar, and give you 30 minutes to kind of do your own thing. I'll put on some nice music in the background. And even same thing can happen to the top or the dominant as well, as we'll have what's called top drop. And that is when I I might experience this feeling of the thing, whatever it is I just did to my partner. I might need some reassurance that I know she said she was okay with it, but I'm going to check in again afterwards to make sure emotionally is everything okay. And I want her to understand, that's not, maybe what I said in that heat of that moment that we discussed. I need to be crystal clear, both ends, that's, I really don't think of that of you. And, that was within the realm or the confines of that scene, if you will.
Okay. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it makes sense. And is it generally people that are into this do it together? Or, I guess obviously at some point someone has to be introduced. Have you been with someone that was new to it? Is it different? I assume they wouldn't even know. Like if I had a list of 500 things, I'd be like, I wouldn't even know what most of it is.
That'd be really intimidating, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can't prescriptively tell everyone how to do something like that, but my general advice would be take it very slowly. And, and that's a great question, is I probably would not recommend presenting someone on, first date. Hi, here's the 500 things, and I've listed them all in order with color coordinated Excel spreadsheets that, change colors so that I can find, narrow in exactly where I want to go. And a lot of people that are just starting, they have no idea what, some line is on that spreadsheet. An example would be something like fire cupping, right? So I don't, first of all, fire, no thank you, right? Most people might say. And I don't know what you're going to do with a cup, but you're not throwing fire on me from a cup is what somebody might think. And the reality is it's actually a massage technique that's used from the Far East, where they actually put a small bit of alcohol inside of a glass jar, light that on fire, blow it out, and then that's placed on the skin, and suction is then created. So it sucks a little bit of skin, and most of those are probably about 3 to 4 inches in diameter, and those are placed at several parts of the body. And in that case, not designed to cause any kind of physical harm, but just feels really good.
I think there's massages like that now too. Cupping.
There are.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I have introduced folks to flogging, and again, you would think, from watching Passion of the Christ, for example, but I would say no, thank you. Hard limit on something like that for me personally. I care not to be left bleeding and with open wounds, which is to me pretty horrible. But flogging can actually be it almost feels like a massage. So just like somebody would take their hands and kind of go back and forth with them very quickly over your back percussively. It can feel like that. And there are floggers that are made with very large and long and thick tendrils or falls. And those are designed to give a very flat, very broad, it spreads out the impact quite a bit. So there isn't this very sharp, stingy type pain that you, again, would see on TV. So, this gets back to the new person just getting started is, hopefully it's the person that's introducing it to you. They could be either a sub or a dom or a top or a bottom, but if they're introducing this to you, hopefully, the real safe way would be that both of you can go and do the research. Red flags in the community would probably be things like, don't you dare get any other information from anyone else but me. Red flag. You should be able to get information from anyone or anywhere that you choose. That's something I've heard be an issue. And I certainly would encourage all of my partners, absolutely, go research, everything you can go get your hands on or your ears on or your eyes on, whatever, and then come back to me and let's talk about it. And that can lead to some really good negotiations, and it can even be sexy. It can be kind of hot to talk about what it is that you want, or, kind of within the confines of whatever it is you want to explore. And, and a lot of times, even with finding, hey, I really liked, I liked that flogger, but I didn't like that other flogger, or I liked it when you did this here. And even, again, I hate to bring it up, and I don't hate to, but I'm bringing it up again, is even when using a flogger, there are good places to hit, and there are places you do not hit. They will cause injury and harm. And whoever is wielding that instrument needs to know where those things are, and they should be educated on where those things are. So again, very much unlike what you might see in mainstream pornography, where, a lot of those are, in my opinion, very extreme and not safe, unless somebody's going to sit down and talk about exactly what is going to happen, so that both parties would understand, and they're of age, and they can physically and mentally consent. There are people that have maybe a mental illness, a severe mental illness, and if they can't provide consent, that mentally, then the answer is no. That's not for you, and maybe go find something else that you might enjoy, because again, need to have all of that consent all the way across the board, and that's really important.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that was stressed at that conference too. It just sounds like people probably do a lot more talking in this environment than the traditional. You just kind of wing
Absolutely.
it, and no one really knows.
Exactly.
Just try
And
stuff.
exactly. In a non-kink environment, you certainly wouldn't go up, before you kiss somebody. Well, maybe as to be kind of sexy, you'd say, I'm about to kiss you, but you're generally not going to then be very prescriptive about, I'm now going to put my arm on your back. I'm now going to put my arm, my hand on your thigh. It's much more organic. And again, I know it sounds to be very prescriptive to step back, but it's important because there's risk associated with all of that. And, that kind of feeds into the dating issue is, dating is difficult enough. And, finding that person is a challenge. And then you add on top of that another layer, another hoop, so to speak, that someone's, my partner is going to have to jump through, or a wall they're going to have to get over to kind of be my person, and much the same for them. I need to know that, are you going to want to explore these things? Because if the answer is no, okay. My response is, okay, that's, absolutely cool. I get that. And maybe it turns into a friendship, but it certainly narrows the pool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Are there specific sites? I know I've seen a few profiles where someone will say like non-vanilla. I assume that's what that means. But like, are there sites specific that you guys know about and find each other?
Well, I will tell you one that is not, and that is FetLife is not designed to be a pickup website. It's really designed for people in the fetish community to have get-togethers and talk about very specific subjects. But my opinion, from what I know, a lot of the mainstream sites work just fine.
Okay.
I've crafted a profile very carefully. As an example, I can, my profile on my dating website, at the very, very end, it says, I have tastes that are very singular, which happens to be, almost like that quote from that Christian Grey states. And I'm sending a message, without being overt about it, and, giving the list of 500, here's the 500 things I really want to do with you on the, the first time. And that's incredibly daunting and my opinion, very inappropriate. You certainly wouldn't do that at a party. I wouldn't walk up to some person and say, hey, I really like, licking eyeballs, and then start licking their eyeball. Completely inappropriate. Is you've got to take your time and find out and kind of test the waters and say, hey, I'm kind of into some BDSM. Is that something you'd be interested in at least exploring with a new person? And in my experience, most people are at least willing to take a look at it and find out what exactly, they're kind of curious. A lot of them have seen, 50 Shades of Grey. And I think a lot of people in the kink community had a lot of problems with some of the non-consent parts of that. That a lot of that was not prescriptive and wasn't described, hey, what exactly is this going to look like for me? Or, hey, we talked about me not doing that activity X, and then you went right ahead and did that. Not okay. And those activities that are not to occur are called hard limits. And you can have a hard limit, which means absolutely not, under no circumstances would I do that. No matter how excited I am, that's not happening. You can have a soft limit, which could mean, hey, I might be interested in exploring that with you, but we're going to have to discuss that, exactly what that looks like. And then we can approach that. And then you might have something, hey, I really enjoy that. So there's a spectrum, if you will, for each one of those activities. And again, you were talking about the list of 500 items, trying to keep that all straight in anybody's head is virtually impossible. And the other thing that happens over time, and I've found the same thing, is my tastes change. I can tell you what I enjoyed when I first started exploring kink is very different than what it is now. Some things came in to the list and some things fell off the list. Some things that I thought, oh, this is going to be really hot, whatever that activity was. And I did it a couple times and it didn't work for me. I didn't enjoy it for whatever reason. And those were soft limits that I started with. And I've even found some things that when I first started were absolute hard limits, like not doing that. And then at some point along the way, I thought, wow, hey, that's actually kind of hot. I like that. And I've even seen some things that I started with that fall to hard limits. So it's kind of gone, it can go both ways. And I can I've found too that I might have different limits with different people. So for example, someone might be dominant to one partner, and then after that relationship is done, they may go to have a different relationship with another partner, and that dynamic, they feel submissive to that partner. So it's very fluid in that, what our tastes are change. They change over time, just like the foods you like change over time. And, what food you want to eat today may not be the same thing. And, I got sick and tired of eating vanilla ice cream, every day. I just didn't like that. So, I'm using that as a euphemism, but, that to me was what that was like. And I craved more. I wanted more, kind of more variety, and more of that. Yes, thank you, more please.
Yeah. And that the few people I talked to in the conference that did this, they were long relationships, like, going on 20 years, 15 years. So they needed to add a little spice, and that's what they turned to. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say are the misconceptions that you would like to clear up, or myths out there? Or I know you covered a little bit of it, but any?
Sure. I think one misconception is that, anybody into BDSM is going to want everything on the list. That's absolutely not true. And I think another misconception would be, and I've already talked about wanting only a few things on that list. And I may even only do one of those things with somebody, at one sitting or in one scene. I might only spank them and do nothing else.
And I was going to say, if you have final thoughts in general, because I generally do this around 30 minutes, so I know time has flown by.
We're perfect then.
But yeah, so anything you wanted to leave?
A couple things. Yeah, just if BDSM is something, that you're interested in exploring, there is an organization called the Black Rose that's in Washington, D.C. They provide education on BDSM, how to do it safely within the confines of the community, and a great way to meet other people. And then also there's plenty of websites out there on RAC and what that is, and consent. And again, I would encourage you to go after, if this is something you want to explore, again, look for those red flags, that somebody says this is the only way to do it, or you've got to do it absolutely my way. Those would be no thanks, to move on. So just be safe out there, have a good time, among consenting adults, it's all good.
Yeah, sounds like it. I mean, yes, I can see where people would be open to this. So hopefully this spurs some innovation and experiences to some people that might not have wanted to or thought, otherwise. But thank you very much for being on the episode. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, I hope you guys liked hearing about this. And obviously all the resources you mentioned, I will put in the description as well. And thank you everyone for listening. And this has been Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. All right. Thank you.
Frank Talk, sex and dating educates.